welcome to our video looking at how to read a crochet chart. We are going to be working from our free to download traditional granny square chart as part of our Learn to Crochet course. And the reason we've chosen to use this particular chart is granny squares tend to be universally known crochet pattern. Even for beginners, this is a great place to start. So our suggestion here would be learn how to make a granny square and then come back to looking at the chart, because your brain will be able to logically look at symbols and know how they work in the real world. And it's a really good place to start to reading all sorts of crochet charts. And the reason you might want to look at crochet charts or learn to understand and read them is they are universal. They are presented in the same way across all languages and across all terminologies, which means, of course, you then have access to working designs that perhaps you wouldn't have been able to due to language barriers or whatever that may be. So, as I mentioned, this is our free to download traditional granny square chart, and there's a link below the video for you to download it, so you can download and print it off as we work through if you want to. We will have a look at it in some detail, but the general rule for all crochet charts is you've got a chart here at the top, or the main chart, if you like, doesn't have to sit at the top, the main chart, and then underneath or to the side you will have this, which is a key, which will help you understand the symbols that are written there. You may have colour coding like we've got here, explaining what rounds you're on, but the main part of the key will be explaining the symbols, and that is absolutely key to understanding a chart. Now, a traditional granny square, as you know, doesn't use many stitches. We have got those UK treble or US double crochet, we've got slip stitches, and we've got chains. So we've only got 3 symbols to learn, but there are an awful lot more. And again, we have a free download on our resources page with the link below the video for stitch symbols and abbreviations, and there's absolutely loads in there that you can look at. So that's a handy guide moving forward for you to refer to if you're looking at other charts. So if we start and look at the chart, the granny square chart, what we've done here is we've placed it next to an actual completed granny square, and what you will see immediately is that they look identical. It's very easy to see that the chart on the left, even if we can't quite read it yet, we can see that the chart on the left represents very accurately the picture of the completed work on the right. So with our granny square, we've already mentioned it's made up of 3 components. We've got the slip stitches, the chains, and the stitches themselves, which are called trebles in the UK or double crochet in the US. So let's have a little look at each of those symbols in turn and break it down a little bit further. So what we've done here is we've circled a group of 3 stitches, and hopefully you'll be familiar with the fact that granny clusters are made up of these 3 stitches. And if we blow that little bit up a little bit more, you will see that that is what those symbols look like. They're 3 symbols all together. They're actually the same symbol, even though the ones on the left and the right are slanted. It is the same symbol, and this is what it will be represented like in your key. And the thing to look at here is a T shape with a slanted line going through it, and that represents the treble crochet in the UK and the double crochet in the US, and that is what the main stitch, or the only real stitch in a granny square. So you can see when you sort of take a step back and look at that chart that you can see all those stitches sitting around each round, and hopefully now you're sort of starting to realise what the symbols are helping us towards, and that is knowing where to put the stitches. So next element then, we've got our little chain, and a chain is called a chain across both US and UK terminology. So blow that up a little bit, it looks like that, and that is how it is represented in the key. Our final component is the slip stitch, and the slip stitch is this little dot here. It's absolutely tiny. It's always represented by a dot, and again, it's a universal abbreviation across UK and US terminology. Okay, so we've identified our 3 symbols, and how do we read them? How do we work them? So let's have a closer look at a corner, because again, if you are familiar with the granny square, and hopefully you've made one by now using the course, if you're familiar with a granny square, you'll know how to work a corner. A corner is simply, in UK terminology, 3 treble, 3 chain, 3 treble, and in US terminology, 3 double, 3 chain, 3 double. So that's a familiar sort of little section of stitches that we all know. And because we all know them, we know what order to do them in. We know that we're working counterclockwise, and that is all our right-handers will be working counterclockwise. Many of our left-handers will be working counterclockwise. Following a crochet chart, we will be following it counterclockwise. So let's just look at this in each stitch group in isolation so I can show you what I mean. So that first group of stitches for a corner, UK 3 treble, US 3 double, is this one here. Okay, it's this one here. That's where we would make our first, if we're working round, that's where we would make the first cluster into the corner. We then make our 3 chain in the middle to hop us around the corner. And the second cluster is to the left of the first one. So we're working counterclockwise, as I mentioned. So I've pulled that example from the outside round of this granny square, but of course we don't work from the outside in, we work from the inside out. So let's go to the centre and have a look at how we start off our granny square and what that looks like on our chart. So the centre point is here, and if you look closely, you will see that it is made up of 4 chain and a slip stitch. So there's a little reminder of our abbreviations, the chain and the slip stitch. And what that looks like in our written pattern is make 4 chain, slip stitch to join to form a ring. So let's break it down by reading our chart. Okay, and we're looking at the very centre point here. So we've got that, I've just lifted that centre point out so we can look at it in some real detail. So the make 4 chain part, here we go. We've got chain number 1, number 2, number 3 and number 4. And then we've got to slip stitch those chains to join to form a ring. And there is our little slip stitch. All right, so we've worked around that centre counterclockwise again, and we've finished with the slip stitch. The slip stitch is the finishing point. And that, the photograph there shows you what that looks like in reality. That is the point that you will get to once you've followed that tiny little centre point. Okay, and that is the section there that we're looking at. So moving on then, once we've done our starting ring, the next thing that we're looking at is this little chain here, this little section that's going up and away from the centre, and it is always chains. We're always going to have, you know this, we're always going to have to make some chains to get our hook to the height it needs to be to fit our stitches in. So you're looking there at 3 chain, that's what you're looking at, that's what it looks like sort of blown up. And again, there is our abbreviation. So in our pattern, our written pattern, it would say, or in our heads, it would say 3 chain, counts as a stitch. And let's break that down again. So we're working this time from the centre upwards, okay? Because if you think about it logically, your hook is at the centre point, all right? So our 3 chains start here, 1, 2, and 3. All right, and that is what it looks like once you have completed those 3 chain, because they are not in isolation, they are building on to the centre ring that you've already made. So you've actually, looking at that photograph, you've actually completed this highlighted section here in the centre. Okay, so where do we go from here? Well, at this point, I would like to look at where we start and end each round, because it becomes really important as we work through the chart. We know that we start each of our granny square rounds with 3 chain, and we know that we end each round with a slip stitch. You will remember that if you've worked a granny square. And pulling out those 2 little pieces from the chart, that's what they look like. We've got our starting round and our slip stitch to end. And what you will notice here is that the starting chain is on the left and the slip stitch is on the right. Okay, so you need to remember that starting chain is on the left, slip stitch is on the right. And what that means is that all of the stuff that happens in between is worked in this anti-clockwise or counterclockwise manner, so in the direction of the arrow on the chart here. So just hold that in your head, because it becomes really important in future rounds, and I'll explain why as we go along. Okay, so let's continue with this foundation round, and we're looking at this section that we've circled here, and blowing that up, it looks like this. So hopefully you're recognising this now as 2 treble stitches, UK terminology, or double crochet stitches, US terminology, and 3 chain. And as a reminder, this is the direction we would be expecting to work those in. So number 1 would be one of the stitches, number 2 would be the second of the stitches, and number 3 would be those chains. So in our written pattern, this is what the written instruction would look like. So in the UK terminology, it's 2 treble into the ring, 3 chain. In the US, it's 2 double crochet into the ring, 3 chain. And if we go back to our chart, you will see that those stitches are coming up out of the centre, out of the ring there. They're sort of touching or pointing towards the centre ring. So that's how we know where to put those stitches. So again, the 2 treble in this order, number 1 and number 2, and then the 3 chain, and in this order 1, 2 and 3. So if we look at the photograph here, you can see that it relates, you can see the correlation, can't you, between what you've actually worked in reality and what it looks like on the chart. That's what's so helpful. They are very, as I said at the beginning, very pictorial. So knowing what we know now, that we continue to work in an anti-clockwise or counterclockwise way around the stitches, this is what our foundation round will look like when we get back to the beginning, just before, to the beginning point, just before we slip stitch to fasten off. You can see again how that relates to the chart. It looks very, very similar. You can really identify what it looks like, and when we slip stitch to close, even more so, you can see that we've got that foundation round completed there and nicely sort of fastened off. Now what you don't see on this picture is cutting the yarn, fastening off and sewing the ends in, but you can see the point. We've just completed that slip stitch and we're ready to move on. Now at this point I wanted to have a look at the next round, and in particular I want us to pay close attention to the starting chain and the position of the slip stitch. So let's blow that up and have a look at it. The starting chain and the slip stitch here, and I'm just going to rotate it so that it is kind of in the it's in the direction that it will actually be worked. So you can see we've got our 3 starting chain as normal and our slip stitch, but what do you notice about this? Bearing in mind what we looked at earlier, the starting chain here is on the right and the slip stitch is on the left. Now what does that mean? Well, if you think back to working our granny square, you will remember that we turned our work at the end of each round, didn't we? So once we completed our foundation round, we actually are turning our work and we are working round 1 with the wrong side of the foundation round facing you. Okay, so what you're looking at in this photograph is we've just finished, we've just completed round 1, and you can see that what we're looking at is the wrong side of the work, so the wrong side of the foundation round. Okay, now in crochet charts you will sometimes be given arrows to show which direction you should be working, but that isn't a standard. You won't always get that. So what we wanted to give you here, although it is complex, we wanted to give you the ability to just be able to look at your chart without any wording at all or any extra arrows and work out which direction your work is in. And that is very easy to maintain, or very easy to ascertain, I beg your pardon. Very easy to ascertain by looking at the position of the slip stitch and the starting chain. So when, like on round 1 here, the slip stitch is to the left of the starting chain, the starting chain is to the right, what that means is that you have turned your work. So you have to read the chart clockwise, but you are not magically going to start working your stitches backwards. You're just going to be working them in the same way, so which is anti-clockwise, but it's because you have turned your work over. This is something which is much better understood if you're working it. So what I would suggest at this point is you stick this video on pause and you go and make those 2 rounds, and it will twig and you will understand why the chart is written as it is. But let's just have a little look at the practicalities of reading it in the other direction. Okay, so let's have a look at reading this chart now, and we won't put any written instructions alongside it because the point of the chart is that we want to do away with that. We want to be able to just pick up a chart and follow it without having to read through a pattern. So let's do that now, and we're going to start with this corner section that we've highlighted here. We need to obviously start from our starting chains. We've found that, the 3 chain, and we will look at that whole corner section there. So we've blown that up a little bit, and the first thing that you can see there is that all of the stitches in that first section, in that first corner section, they're all worked into the corner chain space from the foundation round. You can see where they're all pointing to. That's where we're going to be working the stitches. That's our first piece of information. Okay, so we know that we start our granny square with 3 chain, because that is the height that they need to be. The chains need to be to get us up to the height of the stitches that we'll be using. So there's 3 chains there. Obviously, if you're joining in a new round, that means one of those chains has been used to secure the new yarn colour, and the other 2 are added on to make it 3 chain to get your hook to the right height. All right. Then we're working now to the right. There's nothing to the left of that chain on our chart here, this little bit that we've blown up. So we're moving to the right, and we've got these 2 stitches going into the corner chain space. They are trebles in UK terminology, and they are doubles in US terminology. Still in that corner chain space. We've got our 3 chain, nice and simple. Everybody works with the same terminology there. And again, moving again round to the right or clockwise direction. The next thing that we've got are 3 stitches going back into that corner chain space. Okay, so it's reading okay. We're reading it clockwise, but let's look at the photograph of what that looks like when we've made it. And what you will see here is, for the first time, our completed work for that section, it doesn't look like our chart. It looks like a mirror image of our chart, okay? And that is because we're reading it clockwise, we're working counterclockwise. Okay, so here's a nice little aid memoir, which you can use on any chart. If you are seeing the slip stitch to the right of the starting chain, you are reading your chart anti-clockwise and your work is right side facing. If you are seeing the slip stitch to the left, you have to read that chart clockwise and work with the wrong side facing you. In both situations, your stitch is going to be worked in the same way. So you are physically making your stitches in the same direction. It is just how you read your chart and which direction your work is facing. So there's a nice little aid memoir there. You can perhaps take a picture of that or whatever, because that will stand you in good stead with any crochet chart you look at. Let's go back to our chart then and have a little look at what that means for the rest of it. So if we look at round 2, we can see that the slip stitch is to the right, which means we read the chart anti-clockwise and the right side of our work is facing us. And if we look at the final round, round 3, the slip stitch is to the left, which means we read the chart clockwise and we work with the wrong side facing us. All right, so that's what it means in terms of what the chart we've got in front of us here. And that really is the last piece of the puzzle in terms of understanding this particular granny square chart. There isn't much more that we can look at that will add anything to you being able to understand it. So the best course of action now is for you to print it off or put it on your screen and go and have a bash at making a granny square. Another good resource for you is if you go back to our resource page, the link is in the information below the video. If you download the written pattern to accompany the granny square, throughout that pattern we have broken down the chart, so you can also refer back to sort of photographs and written instructions and see which part of the chart they relate to. So that's another really helpful way to make sure you're sort of reading the chart and understanding it in the right way. So do go and have a look at that as well. But for now, let's have a little recap of what we've covered already. So we know that all charts are universal, which means that we don't need to worry about language. We have symbols to represent the stitches, and our charts will always come with a key to explain what those symbols mean. For our granny square, we just had 3 elements. We had chain, slip stitches and UK treble crochet or US double crochet. We had a look at how to start, and in this case the project was right at the centre with that 4 4 chain ring, so we know what that looks like. We know about the starting and finishing point of each round, starting point being starting chain and finishing point being a slip stitch. We know where the stitches point indicate where we're actually working those stitches, so whether we're working into, for example, the center ring or a corner chain space. We had a look at what it means with the positioning of the slip stitch, if it's to the right or the left, what that means in terms of which direction we read our chart and which side of the work we're looking at. And finally, if your work looks like the chart, you're doing something right, because the whole point of the chart is it's very pictorial. It looks like what you're going to make. It isn't lines of text. It is an actual picture of what your finished crochet should look like, but just with the stitches represented by symbols. Okay, so that really is it. That's what we can give you in terms of looking at a chart. And this last video is sort of the last of our Learn to Crochet course for now. So hopefully you will find something helpful in here. Do go back and have a look through the downloads. Do go back and revisit any videos that you find helpful. And we are so excited to hear where this takes you next. We would love to know that you're moving on to something new crochet wise, and we hope this is the start of a very long and very happy relationship with crochet, and we wish you all the very best of luck.